This week's project is about accessibility. I'm going to be making a project for someone who's starting to have some issues with their arm movement, like putting their arms over the head to pull on a shirt, that sort of thing. And we're finding that anything that they can pull on and zip up the front especially, or if it has a large button, is the easiest. And you may know somebody who struggles with this, whether it's arthritis or shoulder injury. There's a lot of reasons why clothing can be difficult to wear. It's not going to look like accessibility clothing. I actually was Googling it. I was out on the interwebs, and I'm really pretty disappointed in what they consider accessibility. A lot of it's just sort of like tracksuits or soft knit clothing, which is fine, but not super fashionable. And the person I'm sewing for is very fashionable. They have always looked like a fashion plate. And the last thing they want is to wear clothing does not show who they are, does not show their personality and their style. So let me show you the pattern we're working with. It's a regular pattern. It's McCalls 7390. And I chose this for a couple of reasons, but then one reason for this particular project is it has a seam down the center front. So I didn't have to do any special pattern making to add a zipper right down that seam. It currently does not call for one, but it's going to get one. And I want it to still look like a seam. And guess what I found? Separating invisible zipper. Woo, I am so excited. So I believe this was a 22-inch long. I'd have to remeasure. It's 22 or 24. Found it on Etsy. There's a few other suppliers out there online, but I'm more and more. Etsy is my go-to place. So I got two of them. I got this navy blue one because I'm working in a blue project today, and I also got an ivory one to try for another project, so I have an extra zipper. They are not cheap. I would say they run $7 per zipper. Zippers aren't cheap anyway, as a rule, but if you want a separating and invisible zipper, you're going to pay a little more for it. I'm super excited about the fabric because my sister designed it. I have a sister who is a very gifted artist, a textile artist. She just multi-talented. I'm super proud of her. And she designed this fabric. If you frequent quilt shops, you've seen the QTFabrics line, Quilting Treasures, and she's doing multiple lines for them. This is the first one. I only have a few of the entire line, but let me show you. Ta-da, this is going to be the placket down the front of the pattern. So you can see the little stripes down the front. I'm going to do it in this one. And then I'm going to do this for the top bodice. There's a seam, sort of a waistline seam. So the bodice is going to be, the top of the bodice is going to be out of this, and the little peplum is going to be out of this. So when you see the three together, ta-da, this is what they look like. I'm so excited about it. And because this project is for my mom, she's getting a garment sewn by me with fabric designed by my sister, which I think she's going to really like. I visited her recently, and my mom that is, and I fitted the paper pattern. So I've already got my paper pattern right here traced off because, again, multi-sized pattern. This one's a 14 to 22. So I've made all the adjustments already for the pattern for my mom, and I'm going to go cut this out. Now, because I'm cutting this out in multiple fabrics, I'm going to pull out just this front placket piece and cut it out of the stripe. I'm going to pull out the top bodice pieces and cut it out of the light, and then the peplum out of the dark. We're heading to the cutting. Cutting out the front placket, that is the stripe, and I'm very carefully lining up exactly how it is. I'm paying attention to where my seam allowance, I actually drew my seam allowance on here because I want to get the center of this stripe, this color. I am going to be using what's left of this fabric because I've got plenty for some other things for me. So this will show up in another project. So here's the bodice top part in the lighter fabric. I'm doing the little peplum in the dark, and I've got my bodice back on the fold. Here's my bodice front, and here's the elbow length sleeve, and I still have some fabric left over to do something fun with. And I'm just gonna let you know, when your sister designs the fabric you're working with, you keep these fun selvage edges that have her name on it. Here are my top bodice pieces, my top bodice front and back, and what I've done is I've gone to the serger and I've seam finished just the edge of the shoulder and the side seam and nowhere else, and I know you can't see it in the camera, but it's done. And what we're doing now is we're going to pin our fronts and our backs together at the shoulder and the side seam. So we need to do the same thing to my back, and then we're going to just pin them together and straight stitch that together on the sewing machine, and we will have our bodice front and back together along the top. That's step 1, and then step 2 has us doing the same thing for the bottom half, which is sort of the peplum looking part. So I'm going to get those pieces together and then I'll come back and show you what to do. This actually is going to go pretty fast. I'm not doing a pocket in this version, so if you want to do the pocket, I apologize. That's just not going into the design that I'm doing for this particular one. However, I am putting a zipper in, so I'm going to talk you through doing it without the zipper, and I'm going to show you how to do it with the zipper, so you can get both versions. All right, back in a minute. Pinning together my side seams and my shoulder, and I just want to give you a little heads up. If you're new to sewing, if you have, you can see this seam, this waistline seam is angled. See the shape there? And what will happen is at this little seam right here, you'll get this little thing where you want them to, you think in our head, we think in our head, we want this to match up perfectly. This should come to the edge. But what you have to consider is where it needs to match is at the 5/8 inch line where you sew it. So right here, where I'm stitching, it matches perfectly. And this is the seam allowance. So if you have a little bit of a discrepancy there, it's fine. What matters is right here at that 5/8 inch line. So that when it's sewn and it opens up, this makes a nice, perfectly smooth seam. Ta-da, like that. So don't be concerned if you see that. That will often happen up here. The most common place you'll see that is in this little neckline area, right here where your front and back neck, shoulder meet at this little neckline. A lot of times the front neckline will come out and the back neckline will come in, but they meet perfectly right at the seam allowance. If you're sewing this together only on the sewing machine and not doing overlock for your seam finishes, instead of zigzagging this first and then putting it together, it's wise to first do your straight stitch and then open this up and then zigzag it. You're just zigzagging tends to give you a little bit more distortion and pull and stretch and roll over and that sort of thing. So if it's already sewn, you don't have to worry about it affecting your stitching line later. So this is our little bodice sewn together. I've already ironed it. I'll show you the little seams on the inside. So here's my seams pressed open. So they're just straight stitched and pressed open. Now if you're sewing this all on your sewing machine and you aren't using an overlock, straight stitch together your garment first and then come back and pull up just one seam allowance at a time and zigzag that edge, or do a mock French seam, something like that, to finish off these nice straight edges. Once you've done that, we're going to come back and do the exact same thing to the bottom part. So we're going to grab our little peplum pieces. I'm going to finish off the straight edges, not doing the waistline on either garment yet, because we're going to put those together and I'm going to serge all of that together to make it nice and flat and neat. So we're going to take, so I've done step 1, which was put this together and iron it. Now with step 2 is putting together the peplum. So we're going to do step 2 next, and exactly the same thing. Seam finish if you're serging, side seams only, and then sew together just the side seams. If you're sewing it at a sewing machine, sew it together first on the side seams, then seam finish those side seam edges. I'll show you that when we're done. Real quickly, because I'm working with a dark fabric on the bottom and a light fabric on the top, I chose to serge everything with the white, because if I serged with the dark blue, it would have shadowed through on the seam finishes, and I don't want that. I am sewing the majority of the garment in the white thread, but I have chosen to, for this little section, to go ahead and put my dark thread on to match this for the side seams, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the front zipper placket too, which is more in the dark blue colors, and that's just personal choice. You can choose to just stick with one thread color throughout. Just make sure it's the thread color that won't shadow through if you have a light and a dark fabric. All right, here's the peplum sewn and pressed open, and now we're ready to pin it to the bodice. So we are now moving on to step 3. We're pinning our bodice on right now and to this peplum, and you want to start at the little side seams right here. So we're pinning bodice side seam to peplum side seam first.
So we're going to do both of those side seams, and then we'll come back and we'll do center back of each, and we'll work our way around. If you start at one end and work your way across, nothing's going to line up. It slowly eases its way across. You get a little bit of creep, a little bit of ease in your fabric, so you want to be careful. Also right here, where we're matching up our center front and our center back, or I mean our center front peplum to our center front shirt, the angles are going in an opposite direction. So it's the same thing where if I match this up at this outer corner, if I look at it like this and see it's perfect on the outer corner and I flip it over, and oh no, where I sew it, it's not going to meet. You want to bring that little thing over so that you are meeting right at that 5/8 inch line. They meet perfectly. So you're going to see a little bit of your peplum peeking through on the shirt side, but when you go to put them together, it works out just right. Okay, I'm going to keep pinning and then I'll show you what it looks like.
We're just pinned together now, bodice to peplum. So right now, it's kind of like a little vest. So we're just going to sew this down on our 5/8 inch line. And once we've stitched our 5/8, I'm going to come back and I'm going to serge this raw edge. All right, I've got my bodice front to peplum. It is super cute. I'm really pleased with it. And I've straight stitched it. And then I went back and I overlocked that raw edge. If you're sewing on your sewing machine and not a serger, just zigzag these two together like that, and then it's ready to be pressed. It will have to be pressed up because of just the shape of the garment. So the seam will be pressed up towards the shirt, the bodice portion. And if you're doing a pocket, now is the time to add it. I'm not. So I'm skipping all of the little pocket sections on this, and we're going to go ahead and hem this portion next. If you're doing the straighter peplum, it has 1.25 inch hem, so you'll pull up your full inch, tuck under your quarter, and top stitch it. If you're doing the more curved peplum, the one that has more fullness in it, it only has a 5/8 of an inch hem, which is what I have. It's also more curvy. So if you're having a hard time with this very round, see how round that is? Sometimes it's really hard to get that extra fullness to flip over and stay in place. It just gets bunchy. Run a little basting line in there first, between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. I'm turning at the 1/4 inch, so that's about where I've stitched it, just to make it a little easier. And then you can pull those little threads once in a while if it's not going under. It also gives you a nice little guideline for tucking. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tuck that under and pin it and stitch it. I again switched back to the dark thread for top stitching this because I don't want to top stitch this in white. I want it to disappear as much as possible. So I'm going to start pinning. Here's an example where it gets really curvy, and I've just taken a pin and pulled a little bit of that thread, and see now it's pulled this in, and it makes it much easier for me to now tuck it under to stitch it. So here, just trucking along. Now I'm pinning on this side. I'm working on this side, but pinning on the other. You can do it however works for you, but I'm going to stitch it on the right side. I'm also coming in and gently pressing this little edge, but you have to make sure your pin heads are out of the way. You don't want to press over a pin head. So the hem is pinned in. It's a very full hem if you're doing the little wide peplum. So I go all the way around. So this is the wrong side, and my pins, and it's pressed. My pins are on the right side because this is where I'm going to be stitching from. I'm going to be looking at this side. So now I'm ready to go to the sewing machine and top stitch it down. Okay, here's the hem stitched in. There it is from the back side. And if I have any places where the basting stitch shows, I'll just pull those out real quick, like right there. Here's what we have so far. It's our little top. Very cute. I've got it all serged up to the point where I'm at. And I'm not doing pockets, so since I'm not doing pockets, I'm checking up here, I'm skipping all of those steps. I've done 11, which is the hem. Or if you're doing the peplum, it's 12, 13, 14, and 15. So all of those parts are done, depending on which view you're doing, and we're up to the front placket. So the front placket, if you're not doing a zipper, this is the shape of our placket. Open it up to the dark side, make it to the dark side, like this. Okay, so you can see it has this little shape. So there's a little circle on your pattern, and that circle is how far up you're going to sew. And you're going to have 2 sets, so there's 4 of these. And on this little piece up here is where it's going to get sewn to the shirt. See this curve down? So on this part, if you're not putting in a zipper, number 17, 16 is if you want to do a lace overlay with this. That's view D, shows a little lace overlay. So if you want to do the lace overlay, that's step 16. Step 17, we're going to sew from the dot down for both of these and then press them open. All right, so that's what you're going to do if you're not doing a zipper. If you're doing a zipper, we're going to go to top down and I'm going to show you how to pin in. We're going to just sandwich the zipper in here and put on my invisible zipper foot and zip it down for both sides. Okay, so I'll show you that next. Putting in the zipper, I have 2 placket pieces here, and there's a zipper hiding on the inside. Believe it or not, I have the right side of my invisible zipper down against this one, so this is like sandwiched inside. I've gone ahead and pinned it down, so this is on the 5/8 inch line here, but because I'm sewing in a zipper, I've had to move my needle position over. So it's kind of important to mark everything before you go to your sewing machine, because from this needle position over to here, it's 5/8, but if you look at my throat plate, it looks like I'm off. The throat plate 5/8 is for the needle position in the center, but my needle isn't in the center. So you can see, center would be the middle of the foot, it would hit the foot. So you have to think ahead a little bit if you're putting a zipper in about how it's going to change the way things are. Now, because of how I'm working, everything has shifted to the left a little bit, including my seam allowance, but I still have 5/8 inch allowed in here. And I'm going to go ahead and just sew this down as one piece. Even though this is an invisible zipper, it is thicker than a traditional invisible zipper, and it just wouldn't even fit in my invisible zipper foot. So I'm going to have to set it in sort of like a traditional zipper with a regular zipper foot. So as you get close to the bottom down here, there's a giant zipper head that we're going to have to move out of the way. And so what I do is I get about halfway, like I am here, I sink my needle. See, I've got all of this already stitched. And then I go ahead and move that zipper head, grab that zipper head, and I just slide it up past that foot up there. So now the zipper head's all the way up here where I've already sewn, and I can finish working my way down. Now that our zipper is in and pressed, this is what it looks like. It looks great. Now this is only one side. I've got to do this for both sides. This is the side with the zipper head. The other side will just be teeth. I'm going to push this zipper head back up out of the way, and I'm going to sew the hem down here. I'm just going to fold it over, right sides together, and stitch across our 5/8 inch and finish off that hem. So I'm going to do that for both pieces. So I'll have the zipper on both sides and the hem at the bottom on both sides, and then we'll be ready to attach it and do our little neck band. Okay, so this is what it looks like with the zipper in the front. It's not completely invisible, but it's certainly not that noticeable. There's a little zipper head at the top. Now, if you are doing, let me show you this. Okay, so if you are doing without a zipper, how the pattern comes, what you should have done is sewn 2 pieces together up to the notch. You're going to do that for both facings. You're going to press it open. Then you're going to put those 2 facings together, and you're going to sew them at this little notch on the inside, just that little part. Flip it around, press it again. So now you have a facing that's enclosed in the front and has the little notch area completely finished off. Now it's ready to attach to the front of the shirt, which is what we're going to do now. We're going to pin it on. Here's my front placket, and I have pinned the right side of the placket. And for you, it may not be a difference if you didn't put a zipper in. For me, here's my zipper. So I definitely have a right and a wrong. I don't want my zipper head to be to the inside. So I've got right side to right side, and I've just pinned my only one edge down. Now I will tell you, you could pin both of these down and serge this if you want to, but you'll end up with a little piece here that's not enclosed. I want my whole placket enclosed. So we're only going to sew right side to right side, leaving this part open. So I'm just going to sew all the way down, and I can actually kind of push this down out of the way
to stitch right down in here in my 5/8. And I'm going to do that on both sides. So here's the other side pinned. So I'm going to stitch both of those, and then I'll come back and show you how to enclose it. Okay, here's my front placket, and I'm coming down to the hem where the little placket meets, and you can see I've just pulled aside the placket facing, or the placket lining, down like this so that I can just straight stitch down, and I'm going to stop right here and back stitch. Here's the inside after I've stitched on the placket, and now we're just going to press those seam allowances towards the placket like this. You can, if you want to, grade them out a little bit, so you would leave the one closest to the front longest, trim this one down about half, and that would just cut down on some of your bulk. Though this particular fabric is laying so beautifully, I don't know if I'm going to even really worry about it. Then we're going to just pull this over, tucking in our raw edge so that it meets our stitching line, and I'm going to hand whip stitch this shut. Now you could pin it and top stitch it also if you wanted to, but I don't want top stitching any more on this than I'm going to have on just the hems, but you could easily top stitch it. All right, so after we've done that, so I'm going to whip stitch by hand off camera here. I'm going to pull this off. The next step then is to work on our front little neck band, and you're going to interface one band. And a little trick, if you've ever been like me and you've glued down or gotten glue stuck to your ironing board, they make these great little silicone sheets like this. So if you lay down the silicone sheet first, so I did it like this. So I laid down my silicone sheet, then I laid down my piece of fabric, then I put on top of the fabric, it's interfacing, so the glue side is down towards the silicone sheet. And when I press it, if anything comes off, if any glue were to come off, it comes on the silicone sheet and it doesn't stick at all. The thing just peels right back off. And it protects this ironing board and keeps you from getting silicone, or keeps you from getting the glue on it. Now you could lay it this way and put the sheet on top and iron it that way too. But anyway, you want to iron interfacing on one, and then this one, they are having us turn up all the way around the edge, this outer edge. Here it is pinned together, right sides together. One is interfaced, one isn't. The interface side, the directions have you turn up your 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now I've pinned them together, and we're going to go ahead and sew this front edge around the inside circle and down the other edge to finish this off. And then we'll do some clipping, etc., and attach it to our shirt. Here's the neckline sewn. And now I'm going to take my scissors and we're going to trim out this little area so that it turns nicely, and we're going to make some little cuts in like this, up to but not through. I'm sure you've heard me say that lots of times. Like that, see? So it's close but not quite, and that just helps this curve turn nicely for the neckline. So I'm going to do those things and press it, and then we're ready to sew this on to the shirt. All right, here's half of the neckline pinned with a basting stitch to protect that neckline edge that I clipped up to. I do not recommend clipping if you don't do a basting stitch first, because it's very easy for this to accidentally tear past your stitching line. So because I've done that, it fit together perfectly. This side I have not clipped yet, and it will not go together. There's way too much of the neckband currently, just because the shapes are wrong, to go on. I end up with a lot of excess. So now I'm going to go ahead and clip the other half, and then I can sew it around. The neckband is on. This is how it looks from the right side. I have not stitched down the wrong side yet, but I'm going to whip stitch it down. So I've just got a few pins holding it in. But you can see the way the pattern has us do it, it completely encloses the front facing band and the neck band. So you have no raw edges or zigzag edges, that sort of thing. So now we're ready to move on to the sleeve. The sleeve, ta-da! And I'm going to switch back to white thread now because I'm doing the sleeve. So I went ahead and seam finished my sleeve along the hem edge and along the underarm. That's what I'm trying to think of. The underarm here. Did not do the sleeve cap. When I sew the sleeve in, I will go ahead and seam finish the sleeve cap and the arm side. So we're just going to put right sides together and sew up both of these sleeves on the underarm. And we can go ahead and hem it at that point too. If you're doing pretty much any of them, like you can add your cuff if you want to, or you can put add your casing for your elastic. So we're going to go ahead and put the sleeve together and hem it, and then we're going to also run a little basting stitch in the sleeve cap. The pattern has the little circles to say run your basting stitch from here to here. So I'm going to do that too, because this is a high sleeve cap and it may need a little bit of that ease taken out to get it to set in. It is a set in sleeve. There's no gathers, but we just might need a little bit of help getting the fullness to fit in. Sleeve is pinned in, and I did have to do a little easing basting thread, just a little bit to get it to fit. And so I'm just going to zoom around it with my sewing machine, and then I'm going to come over to the serger and finish off the seam. And when I serge it, I always take off just a little bit so that we don't have the full 5/8 of an inch sticking up into our arm. It's just more comfortable if that's trimmed out a little bit. If you're doing it on the sewing machine, then you'll come back and zigzag around that sleeve and trim it out a little bit, at least under the arm. Trim out a little bit under the arm so you don't have that full 5/8 inch underneath there. Sleeve is in, and now I'm just going to head over to my serger. I've taken off my table so I have a free arm, and I'm going to finish that off. And all that's left at this point is the handwork on the neckline, and we are done. Here's the finished shirt. Zipper in the front to make it easier to take on and off. I think it turned out really pretty. I like this fabric a lot. It sews up beautifully. It's a great fabric and it presses very nicely. I just think it's really great. Good pattern. I really like it. I think the instructions are well done. I think it's really cute and fun. So, nice pattern. If you're not doing the zipper, it's a lot faster to sew and put together. All right, I went ahead and just slipped it on. So you can kind of see how it fits, and I think it's super cute. Now this is the one with the fuller peplum, not the straighter one. I chose not to do the pocket because I just thought it was more flattering. I didn't lengthen this at all, so you can kind of see where it fits on my body. And the back is pretty close to my natural waistline, but the front is quite a bit higher. But it's a super cute pattern. I have it slipped on over my shirt so you can see it just zips up the front.